It's the Comedy Insider Podcast. This is Scott Dickers. Today I'm talking with Andrew Daly, who is the star and executive producer of Comedy Central's excellent show Review. He's also a stand-up comic and a comic actor that you've seen in a lot of big movies, TV shows. He had a long recurring role as the school principal on Eastbound and Down. You have been in the comedy business for a long time. I'm curious to know how you got into it.
When I graduated college, at the time that I graduated college, it was 1993, and I had been a comedy fan. I'd been a comedy super fan for a long time, and I had read Wired, the John Belushi story, and I had read a book called The Compass by Janet Coleman. I had been to Chicago. I had seen some improv. It was probably really Wired, which I know is supposed to be a cautionary tale about drugs, but I took it as an inspiring story about John Belushi and how great he was and how serious he was at his craft and what an exciting experience he had through Second City and with Del Close. So anyway, all of that added up to my wanting to go to Chicago and do comedy improvisation. But my parents lived in New Jersey, and I had no money, and so I just moved into their basement and got involved in the New York improv comedy scene to the extent that one existed, which was surprisingly not much. I had read articles about what was happening in Chicago at that time with the neo-futurists and the Annoyance Theater, and Improv Olympic was really doing exciting things at that time. But man, it was slim pickings in New York, but I got as involved as I could, and also started doing stand-up on the advice of an agent, and started seeing the shows, what later famously became the Luna Lounge shows, but at that time were happening at Rebar down in Chelsea.
The burgeoning alternative comedy scene in New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you back up a second? You mentioned an agent recommended that. Did you have an agent already, or was this somebody you just met in the scene?
I had a comedy writing partner in college, a guy by the name of Andy Secunda, and he and I spent a lot of time as a comedy duo in the mid to late 90s, performing around New York. But his sister happened to have been a talent agent. So I was very lucky to be able to graduate college with somebody who was interested, was at least willing to sit down and talk to me, and then did come see me in a grad show, an improv grad show at this theater called Chicago City Limits, where I was taking classes, which is, nobody gets an agent to come to those shows, but because of the personal connection, she came and she was like, yeah, I'll send you out, I'll introduce you to the commercial people, they'll send you out on commercials, and in the meantime, she was like, if you want to get something going in the way of a real career, start doing stand-up, because that people were getting development deals based on 5 minutes of material at that time.
Yeah.
So she was like, even though I expressed no interest in being a stand-up, she said, if you want to be a comic actor, start by being a stand-up.
Interesting. So take us back to, so the advice you got from the talent agent was do some stand-up, and then you started hanging out in the alternative comedy clubs in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, and doing short form improvisation at this theater called Chicago City Limits, which was, I think, technically an off-Broadway show. They had a playbill, and they, when they put up a new review, it was reviewed in the New York Times, and so it was a long-running, established kind of Whose Line Is It Anyway style improv show and song parody review, and it wasn't quite my sensibility, but it was actually a paid comedy improv show. It didn't pay much, but I did 6 shows a week there in a cast of 4 with a piano player for 2 years. And that enabled me to quit my terrible day job at a gym, and then little things would come along, little commercial nibbles and stuff like that. And then around then, Andy Secunda and I started performing as the two Andys, and selling scripts through his sister, who represented us. And so that was sort of my career in the mid 90s, which is the point at which the Upright Citizens Brigade came to New York in 1996. And so I saw their I saw them at Luna Lounge. They were going up every week in Luna Lounge doing different bits and driving people toward their AssCat show. So I saw them there do a really hilarious bit, and then I followed them. They at the end of it, they said, "Come check us out at AssCat at the Solo Arts Theater every Sunday night." And I went. By the time I was there was already a line. The word had caught on. And then at the end of that show, Matt Walsh said, "We're teaching a workshop." So there's a sign-up sheet in the lobby, and I ran to the lobby and put my name on that sign-up sheet because even though I had been doing improv, I had no idea how they were doing what they were doing in AssCat. Like I just could not imagine how it was possible, how they were able to all agree on a scene premise and build it together that quickly and be on the same page sensibility-wise and everything. It just I felt that they were kindred spirits, and I had to get involved. So I did that, and then was heavily involved with that theater to this day.
Wow, yeah. So what you saw them do in their AssCat show, that was just a different league from what you were doing or had been doing at the Chicago City Limits.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had seen in Chicago, I had seen some long-form improv that was exciting and impressive, and so I knew that there were things going on in Chicago that were more interesting than what I was able to find to do in New York. But this was a whole other level of, the four original members, and I think John Glazer was probably in that show too.
So Amy Poehler, Matt Walsh, Matt Besser, and Ian Roberts?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were definitely there, and I know Glazer was playing in those early days. I'm not sure if Brian Stack was even out yet. Doing Conan at that point. So I'm not sure who else was in that show, but yeah, it was a whole different thing, whole different ballgame.
Great. So take us back a little further. I'm interested in before you read Wired. Like as a kid, did you have an interest in comedy? Did you have a funny personality? And if so, where do you think that came from? Like why the interest in comedy?
I've always felt like it's a little hard to say. It's a little bit of a chicken and an egg thing. Like, I know from a young age, people were responding to me as though I was funny, right? And I know that I liked that, and that I sort of fostered it. You know what I mean?
You didn't think they were laughing at you?
I actually have a very specific memory of what may be the first time I got a laugh from a room, and it was in preschool. I would have been 3 or 4, and every day somebody was given the job of walking from this little kitchen area to the main room with a tray of little Dixie cups with fruit juice in them. And this day it was my turn to do that. And that's a big responsibility. And I completely screwed it up. I tripped over something. I got nervous. I spilled fruit juice everywhere, and everybody laughed. Now, it was a mistake, but the room laughed at it as though I had done it on purpose for comedy purposes. Because I think I had been a bit of a troublemaker anyway already. So the assumption was that I had intentionally spilled fruit juice all over the place, which I would never have done. But I really enjoyed the laugh anyway.
That is so interesting because I think a lot of kids would have been mortified by that, and they would have ran into another room and cried because the whole room was pointing at them and laughing. But what do you think it was about you that made you realize or made you somehow spin that positively?
Because I don't know. I experienced the laugh as this crazy, hilarious kid did that on purpose.
So maybe, sorry, go ahead. And
so even though if I embraced that and played it off like I did do it on purpose, I would get in trouble and the teacher would be disappointed in me. It was worth it. It might have seemed, I mean, that is a better option than, oops, I did something by mistake and everybody laughed at me. It's much better it's the classic, I meant to do that, you know.
Right. No, it is the classic response. But yeah, there must have been something going on inside your head where the split second where you realized that it was a big mistake and everybody's laughing at you, and you could have gone one way or the other, and it was just an obvious choice. Well, I want this to turn out well for me, so I'm going to just do my bow and pretend, as opposed to just get really upset. But I don't know, it seems like for a 3 or 4 year old, managing those emotional states right then would be fairly difficult, unless it was just a very clear pain this way, pleasure this way. I'm going to the pleasure. But clearly that's what you did, and that kind of set you on a road, you think.
I think so. I mean, I think for the class to have believed that about me, I think I was probably already a troublemaking kid.
A joke, a jokester.
A little bit of a jokester, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the question is, based on things like that, people reacted to me as though I was funny. My parents have always told stories about me from a very young age that were, I was the Ernie to my brother's Bert, or the Bugs Bunny to his Elmer Fudd, my older brother. And so I don't know if I was funny and made people laugh and then got that encouragement and kept going, or if I don't know. I can't confirm that I was funny first, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Or if the desire to be funny came out of the fact that people were telling me I was funny. To what extent that's true or not. But.
Did you have a lot of support in the family? Did your parents pretend laugh at your jokes, or did your older brother enjoy your funniness?
I think I truly frustrated my older brother a lot, and did it on purpose, because we did watch a lot of Bugs Bunny and stuff like that, and it did seem funny to me to be the pest. And I don't think that they were fake laughing. My parents are good laughers. They were really, they like a good joke. So I think, I think I did get a lot of encouragement in that way.
That's great. And then, did you have any sort of experience doing comedy in your younger days in school, or any taste of what you might have done later, or any inkling that it might be something that you were interested in, or did it all kind of click with Wired?
No, I think that there was a good sense for a long time. I know that my first grade teacher recommended I take a drama class, and I know that I made teachers laugh and kids laugh, and I was pretty heavily involved in asking myself, hour to hour, what can I do to make somebody laugh right now? Like I was into that from a really, really young age, because it was something that I had positive reinforcement on, and just in all moments, all day long, as a school age kid, I was looking for opportunities.
Was that kind of your identity in high school then? Was it like the Joker?
Yeah, I mean there I'm thinking a little more elementary school, but yeah, no, I did a comedy radio show in junior high on our public address system in the mornings, basically just impersonating Martin Short's voices. By high school, I was more into attracting attention to myself in a wider array of methods. Like I ran for office. I wrote for the school paper. I was in a band. So I sort of branched out from just trying to get laughs, because maybe it was because I thought that there were other kids who were funnier than me and who were more widely appreciated as class clowns, or I wanted to be taken seriously. I'm not sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a road a lot of naturally funny people go down in high school. Just all the hormones kick in, and suddenly there are just other priorities, and they want to be taken seriously. Like a lot of comedians, I think, after a long career in comedy, they get that feeling. I want to be taken seriously for my for my comedy.
Right.
So then so your career sort of gets kick-started in New York. You're involved in at the UCB and elsewhere. Is that when you develop your stand-up act? And does Andy Secunda's sister represent you at that point, or do things sort of move on and escalate?
My stand-up career, I was trying to do pretty standard stand-up, and I wasn't good at it. I was good enough at it that certain managers and stuff were nibbling around and sort of encouraging me. I tested at the comedy. Oh, damn it, what's it called? The famous place on the Upper West Side where Lucian Hold would watch people and either pass you or not. The comic strip.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I had a meeting, with him there that was encouraging, but he didn't pass me. But I knew that I wasn't doing something new or interesting. And I was a big fan of Andy Kaufman. I read a lot about him in high school. I wrote a paper on him in college. And so at some point I saw a comic on TV whose jokes were all about how fat he was. And so I, just as an exercise, wrote a whole bunch of jokes from the perspective of a fat comic, where it was just one joke after another. And then just for goofs, I went up and did that set at the Boston Comedy Club one night.
And to be clear, you were not a fat guy at that point.
No, I was very, very, very scrawny as a 24-year-old. And so I just performed just 5 minutes of jokes that would only make sense if an obese person was telling them. And at the end of it, I said, listen, truth is I lost a lot of weight recently, and starting to realize I got to work on the act. Like
That's a great bit. So how did that go over with the audience?
It didn't go over well because I was doing it at a very mainstream comedy room, this club, the Boston Comedy Club. I think that's the only place I ever performed it. And I remember, I specifically remember some sort of pompous older guy in the audience one night, as they're not laughing. When I get to the end and I go, look, truth is I lost a lot of weight. This guy said to the people at his table, oh, finally the punchline. And he wasn't wrong.
Wow. No, I think that's a very advanced bit, and it foretold some of your later stand-up where you're doing a lot of meta humor and characters that are making fun of other comedy characters, just like Andy Kaufman did.
Right. Yeah. And that's when I realized, like, that's more interesting to me. And it's a double-edged sword, because somebody who's able to go up on stage as themselves from a point of view that they can speak from, I think if they click into a voice that works for them, it seems to me that it would be easy to be prolific. For me, when I have to come up with a different person and a different premise for every 10 minutes I want to do, it feels like there's a finite amount of stuff I can do, and also somehow a finite number of times that I can do it. Like the idea of, once I've performed something enough to the point where I've got it, of continuing to do it seems oddly pointless to me. Whereas somebody who I think is performing as themselves will constantly say, yeah, this piece that works, I'll hang on to that. I'll shuffle out some of the other stuff. I'll take this thing that I think I got perfect, and I'll move it out of the set in favor of some newer material. And it just sort of is a constantly regenerating thing. For me, I have a lot of fun doing what I do, but there are those frustrations to it.
Yeah. So at that time, when you started doing other characters and not being up there as yourself, were you kind of breaking away from the pack of your peers at that point, or were other people doing that sort of oddball, sort of meta stuff?
There was some of that oddball stuff going on at Luna Lounge and stuff, but it was the moment where I kind of had to walk away from the clubs, and just say, like, that doesn't work at the comic strip. Nobody wants to see it there. And what does work there is not something that I'd feel inspired to get better at. So I just kind of abruptly stopped doing all of that stuff. The last stand-up gig I had was at Dangerfields on the Upper East Side.
Okay.
Which I think at that point was exclusively a mob operation, a mob front. There was 0 people in the audience, like literally 0. And I was just like, all right, good. That's a good way to go out.
Yikes. Yeah. So after you got better at it, could you go back to the clubs and do your stuff, or do you still only play in alternative type settings?
I have gone back. The Melrose Improv out here, the Hollywood Improv, has always been really receptive to me coming and doing those bits, and I like the idea of doing them there, because that is where Andy Kaufman started out doing his bits. And I headlined there one weekend, and Bud Friedman came to watch my set, and then afterwards he said, "You're like a Gentile Andy Kaufman," which I was like, that's all I wanted, But I don't love to do it because there is a feeling from that audience. They're so conditioned to setups and punchlines, and I become very aware when I'm performing for that audience that I take a good long time, really, before I give somebody something that is a definitive kind of misdirect or a punchline that they can really full out laugh at. When I do those bits at the UCB or something like that, they're laughing at the premise, they're laughing at the character, they're laughing at turns of phrase, they're laughing at the performance of the character. The very idea that this is happening tonight is joyful.
They get the meta humor. They totally get it and appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about your childhood and then your act. A lot of it is blurring the line between laughing with you and laughing at you. Because when you do your act, it seems like you found a voice where it was more comfortable to be laughed at, to play these other characters who people are laughing at. Oh, he's a really lame comedian, or he thinks he's cool and he's not, sort of characters. And it allows the audience to have these layered laughs where they're pointing and laughing at someone, but they're also laughing at the cleverness of you who came up with it. Whereas with a traditional personality-based comedian, they're not laughing at that person. They're laughing with them and laughing along, in a polite way. There's like you get this element of almost impoliteness. You allow them to enjoy mocking you.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the fun.
That's part of the fun. That's fascinating. Yeah.
So then how did you, so you actually were making a living at the Chicago city limits, but then when you moved to UCB and started taking workshops, did your little acting jobs in advertising start paying the bills more, or did you take a little step backwards in order to work on your craft a bit before you really started getting a professional career going?
Well, that time I came to the attention of the Conan people, so I started doing bits there, and I hit a big commercial campaign in '97. And also, Andy Secunda and I, like I said, were selling script ideas to production companies. We sold a few scripts, and so
these are you were pitching ideas for TV shows and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We would put up sketch shows in New York and run them not very many times. We'd do like between 4 and 6 performances, and then take them to LA for showcases. This was something we did twice, and then a third show we took to the Aspen Comedy Festival, and then that was sort of like a springboard to get into meetings and pitch shows and stuff like that. And these were very ambitious, elaborate shows that were that would have been hard to run in a small room for a long time, But so that's what I was doing in the late '90s, and then performing all I could at the UCB Theater. With no day job and just kind of getting by month to month on little Conan gigs and commercial gigs and stuff like that.
And were you and Andy roommates as well at that time?
We lived in 2 separate apartments in the same building in Brooklyn.
What part of Brooklyn?
It was sort of on the border of Williamsburg and Greenpoint, so it was the second stop on the L train.
Got it. That's easy. So the UCB Training Center started becoming more of a thing. It started maybe with that Matt Walsh workshop that he invited you to. Did you go through more workshops, or did you just do the one and then start performing with them?
I think that one-day workshop might have been the only one that they did, because then the next thing was a class. I think it was a 12-week class where 6 weeks were taught by Matt Walsh and 6 weeks were taught by Amy Poehler. And I took that, and then the next class I took was Matt Besser's class, which was thought to be like, this is the top level. Like, this is the class where you're going to learn the Herald. And I took that, like, I want to say it was like 9 a.m. on Sunday. And it was brutal. It was brutal because he's a tough teacher anyway. And for that hour of the day, everybody's in a bad mood. Like, but it was really like, you had to be good. Like you had to bring it, or else it was going to be an unpleasant morning.
I can imagine that. Yeah, he's like, he's an intimidating talent,
Yeah,
and he doesn't seem to, suffer fools.
not at all. Yeah, there's a lot of like a scene will end and he'll say, "What should he have said when she said this? What should he have said?" And then, man, don't give the wrong answer. You know what I mean? Yeah, so
Interesting.
that was a tough class, but there was a process of sort of rewiring your brain, rewiring the thinking in your brain through that, like, problem solving after the scene is over again and again and again, so that you can begin to work up the muscles of problem solving while in the scenes. Uh, and so I took that class, and then later, Ian Roberts always taught level 1, but I had sort of progressed beyond it by that point. But I went back. I asked him if I could please take his level 1 class because I wanted to take class from Ian Roberts, and he was like, "All right, fine." And he's a fascinating teacher because Ian Roberts makes this claim and backs it up every single time that he can do a good improv scene with anyone. So if he teaches a level 1 class, he just jumps up. He'll just go, "Who wants to do a scene with me?" And then jump up and do it. So I did a bunch of scenes with Ian in that class. It was great fun.
Cool. So you'd already started writing. You were writing scripts and pitching those ideas. Did you have any line in your head between writing and performing, or were they all sort of part of the same love that you have for comedy?
I think they were very similar to me because the process of writing with a partner in those days was very much like it was just pitching jokes. It just felt like two guys sitting together doing dialogue, improvising dialogue and pitching jokes and that problem solving. Like, that's fun to me. Like, somebody presents a problem and the solution is going to be a joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it felt very much like working the same muscles.
Yeah,
At that time, because we weren't so super focused on story and relationships and all that. Like that, once you get into that, those are different muscles. But these were very kind of, I would say, live action cartoons that we were writing.
And did any of those shows ever get made even into pilots?
No.
This is just development. You were just feeding off of the development machine.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
That's great.
We wrote 3 scripts, and that felt like something that could have gone on for a long time, but
Sure.
I found it very frustrating. The idea of making work that no one will ever see. And I remember some people at that time, because that was big business at that point in the mid '90s. And I remember some people saying, "Man, you can do that. You can sell a script every year, and they never make it. Like, that's fine." I was like, "No, that's not the goal."
Yeah, there's screenwriters in Hollywood who make millions of dollars a year, and their work is never seen by anyone. That is kind of depressing.
I think so.
So then, when did you make the move to LA?
Well, so Mad TV was a show that I auditioned for every year, just as a matter of course. I would get the call, go audition for Mad TV. I'd take the train up to Park Avenue where Fox was. I'd be put on tape, and I'd never hear anything. And then that changed in 1999. In 1999, I tested for Saturday Night Live, and I put everything I had into that audition.
Of course you did.
Yeah. And I got good feedback, but obviously they didn't hire me. And then a few weeks later, I got the call, "Hey, you want to go in and audition for Mad TV?" And I was like, "You know what? No, not anymore. I don't want to do it anymore." And it was just that thing of saying no that makes people go, "What? Oh, now we have to have him." And so I...
It's so powerful in Hollywood. Nobody says no. And when somebody does, it's like, ooh, he's special.
Right. It really is. I mean, it's a risky move. You have to mean it,
No, it's true. You can't bluff that your way through that.
Yeah. But this was a case where I meant it. I was like, I came so close to SNL and I really wanted that. And then to now go do Mad TV, and I don't do it. But I got cajoled into auditioning, and I auditioned with, whereas in the past I was just kind of going uptown and putting myself on tape for Mad TV and whatever. Now I had this SNL audition that I had really honed and worked on,
Sure.
and I did that for Mad TV. And so they wanted me, and so So that's really what brought me. Well, first I went to LA. I said no. I auditioned. They said, yes, we want you. And I said no again. And then I went to LA for a pilot season thinking I would get something like news radio or something. I thought that was really going to happen for me.
You were just filled with confidence.
Yes, I really was, actually. Looking back at it now, it's absurd. But I really thought I was going to go out there in January of 2000 and land on a sitcom that was going to do 5, 6, 7 years. And then with that money, I'd move back to New York, and that was, then get to do whatever I want. That was the plan. But so I had an unsuccessful pilot season, and at that point, Mad TV asked me again, and I said yes that time because I had, there was a pin had been stuck in my balloon. So that was it. I moved out to LA to do Mad TV.
So tell us a little bit about what was in your SNL/Mad audition. I'm curious.
That's a funny question. I definitely did an impression of my best friend's mom in the 70s when we were kids, that she had this very, very thick New York accent and would try to, and did not know very much about Star Wars, which is what we were obsessed with, but would try to play with us. And it was very funny for her to say, oh, and here comes Boba Fett. And what does Boba Fett want to say to Darth Vader now? Are they friends? She really tried to get into it. It was funny, and she had a very silly voice. And I think I impersonated Hunter S. Thompson, which is a weird, not very useful impression, but I did it very well. I did Hunter S. Thompson as an old man, as he was at that time, because I read everything he wrote, and then I watched him anytime he was on TV, and he was incoherent and absurd in interviews, and so I did that Hunter S. Thompson. Just, the barbarians are at the gate, and Nixon used to say, whatever. He never finished the sentence. I did that. I had this one quick line. I just did a voice, a character that I would later name Chocolate Pudding, but I just did a voice where I said, oh, great. I wanted a monkey and I got a chimpanzee. What a jip. That was it. Moved on from there.
And who was at the audition for SNL? Anybody that you knew, like Lauren?
Yeah. Well, it was, I guess they do it differently, different years. Sometimes they do auditions at a stand-up club, and but this time it was at home base where the host delivers their monologue. The studio was empty except for a table where there was Lorne Michaels and Marcy Klein and another guy who I didn't know who it was, but I was told ahead of time, you're not going to hear laughter, and do not interact. Don't say personally hello. Definitely do not approach for a handshake. Just go up there and do your thing. And there was a camera there, and it was being sort of simulcast to various offices around the building. I remember when I walked out, and I really thought it had gone well, which is great. I mean, whether or not you get something, to be able to walk out and say, I did everything I could do. I gave the best audition I could possibly give. Truly, at that point, getting the job was pretty irrelevant because it's out of my control. So all the things that I could control, I did as well as I wanted to. And walking out of the room, the other guy, who I still don't know who it was, happened to be walking out when I was walking out, like to go to the bathroom or something, and he whispered in what seemed like a very sincere voice, "Great job." And so that was great. But
so you got a lot of feedback probably compared to a lot of the other auditioners.
Right.
You just happened to encounter that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So then you did Mad TV for one season, right?
I did it for one season as a featured player where I was in half the episodes, and then they brought me back for another season as a full cast member. I was in all the episodes.
And how was that experience? You performed only. You did not write, correct?
Well...
Or it's sort of like SNL is a bit of a mix.
They had a weird process there where, because obviously everybody who's coming in for the most part is an actor and a writer. I mean, at the very least, you've created sketch comedy characters that you have you know what they say and who they are. But their process was they didn't want actors to write, which someone suggested had to do with Writers Guild fees and all that stuff. What they wanted actors to do was to sit with writers and pitch your ideas and your characters and have them write it. So that I found that to be an awkward system because the writers they they want to write sketches that are going to get on the air. So for them to be able to write for what are already popular recurring characters is the brass ring. And then, so to have a new guy come in and say, "Hey, I need from you to write my character into a sketch," is always like a little hard to get their attention and a little hard to sell them on your idea. So the whole thing felt a little bit like, particularly since I had said no multiple times, and they asked me multiple times to come, to then show up and to have to like strong arm my way onto the air in this kind of like cajoling, begging way. Just it all felt very wrong. And so, but I made enough of an impression in my first season as a featured player, and I wanted to be successful on the show, that they brought me back. But there was a real weird sense when they brought me back as a full cast member that they, once I arrived, I felt like they were kind of looking at me like, yeah, why did we bring you back? There didn't seem to be a strong sense of what they wanted me to do, so that was a weird season. A feeling from the get-go like, yeah, we brought you back kind of on a hunch, and it's we've already decided it's not working. But so I did a lot of straight man work in other people's sketches, which I took seriously and tried to really do to the best of my ability.
You're a great straight man.
I take pride in it. I do take pride in being a good straight man, which I felt like other people on the show weren't. I felt like a lot of people felt like, all right, what I really want to be doing is my funny character bits, and I'll do this because somebody has to. And I kind of felt like, no, like the straight man has a really important job to ground the reality of the world so that character can be funny and the sketch can work, you know?
And it's challenging sometimes to keep a straight face in a comedy sketch when you can't gesticulate and be goofy. You know, and if the other person's really, really funny, you know, you're teetering on the edge of a Carol Burnett moment a lot of the times when you're the straight man.
Yeah, for sure. There were these two characters, Mo Collins and Ari Spears, used to do these two crackheads, and yeah, it was always funny. Very hard.
Great. So let's take you after Mad TV. You started getting bit parts in movies and other TV shows, stuff like that. And at that point, that's your career. You're a working comic actor at that point.
Yeah. Right after Mad TV was a weird time where I was just I was doing commercials in LA, and I had this weird jag for a while where I kept getting hired for commercials and then getting pushed to the background, which was fine. But so I was paid as a principal actor to be standing in the background of all these commercials. It was a very odd way to make a living for about a year there. And then Crossballs, Matt Besser created the show Crossballs for Comedy Central, which I did and loved every minute of. Like, I think that was such a great show that it was underappreciated and underpromoted at the time.
Yeah, it was sorry. It was such a almost disturbingly funny show.
Yeah.
It was so interesting. And that was done in L.A.
That was in L.A.
Oh, I always pictured that in New York for whatever reason. I guess because all you guys were in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we did that in L.A. in 2004. And then I think it was 2005 that I got, I did that episode of The Office as Ben Franklin, which was really good for me. And people, you know, started to pay attention to me in town. And then Semi-Pro came along, which was really great for me. So, and then Eastbound and Down, which kind of really made things click.
So you're getting recognized in restaurants at that point.
Yeah. Which happened somewhat with Mad TV, but really picked up with Eastbound and Down. But I look at that time between 2002 and 2007 as like a very kind of touch and go, gradual build and a kind of a stressful is this working period. Yeah.
But you were still doing your stand-up at UCB LA, presumably, and still doing some sketch stuff at that point as well?
Yeah, the UCB theater in LA didn't open until 2000.
Okay.
I think. But Improv Olympic was an outlet, and Scott Aukerman's show at M-Bar, the Comedy Death Ray show that he was doing at M-Bar at that time, was a place to do things, and I was doing the improv a little bit. And so, yeah, that really is the period that I was working up more and more of those bits that ended up being on my album, which came out in 2008.
Yeah, and then so how did the Comedy Central show happen? Review, how did that come about?
So Review, I believe Comedy Central learned about this Australian show. It was pitched to them by this international format company that had come into the rights of it, and they saw it and thought of me immediately to play the lead character. And it was sent to me. My agent sent me the Australian version, and I was like, "Yeah, there you go. Yep, I should do that. That's what I should do." But it took a long time from that point to like really figure out when and how to do it. It took over a year somehow. But then, yeah, then we wrote. I wrote a pilot with this guy Charlie Siskel, who was at that time producing. And still produces and runs the Tosh.0 show, so he had a relationship there at Comedy Central, and they knew that he could get things done. And so he and I actually collaborated on the script and shot it together. And I brought Jeff Blitz in to direct the pilot, and that was, God, was that 2011? Wow, yeah, or something. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, wow. And then you were an executive producer on the show as well, in addition to the star.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and did you sort of demand that? You wanted that, or did they offer you that because it's such a star-centered show?
They offered it. Like the initial proposal was that I co-write the script and obviously star, and so that made me sort of a creator of at least this adaptation.
Right.
So it would have been appropriate to call me an executive producer at that point. I didn't ask for it.
Okay. So you worked with Charlie, and you guys made the pilot. And was it a pretty quick process where they reviewed the pilot and decided, yeah, we're going to do this, or how did that go?
It wasn't all that quick. Somehow, I'm always surprised by how long things take in show business. It always seems crazy to me.
It's glacial.
Yeah. So I think we decided, like, we decided in June, I believe it was June of 2011, to do this thing. And it was probably, it was definitely a year later that we started writing season 1. So the process of like, yes, let's do it, writing the script, shooting the thing, getting them to decide, yes, they want to do it, putting all the nuts and bolts together of who's going to produce it as a series and who's going to be in the writing room and all that stuff was 1 year, June to June. Yeah, and then we started in, and working with Jeff Blitz on the pilot was so great. Like he's more than a director. He's a great writer and a very, very funny guy, and a great with a great producer's mind as well. That I just knew I needed him by my side throughout the process, and so I brought him in as an executive producer and a co-showrunner when we started doing the series, and then we put a room together.
Had you worked with him or known him? You obviously knew him before, but had you worked with him? Or?
No, I'd never worked with him before. Andy Blitz, his younger brother, and I were high school classmates, and we used to joke around, do comedy together in high school, believe it or not. So,
and Andy Blitz was on Conan probably when you were performing.
Right.
He was a writer on Conan, yeah.
Yeah, he was a writer and a performer on Conan around that time that I was coming in and doing bits as well. So we've always kept in touch and always had the same, very similar sensibilities. And I knew that his brother, at some point, his brother directed Spellbound, that great documentary, and I met him. I'd only met him a few times, actually. But then I kept track of him, and I noticed that he won an Emmy for directing The Office. And so when it was time to get a director for this comedy mockumentary, I was like, oh, well, this guy made a hilarious documentary and directs actors in a scripted comedy mockumentary. Like, he's perfect for this. And so I asked him.
Great. And then once they bought the show, How does the process change? Now you have a staff and you have a schedule and you're on a treadmill.
Yeah, it was pretty intense, and it was also like we I don't know how to say it, but like when we wrote the pilot, I don't think we put a lot of thought into big questions about the ways in which uh, our version was going to be different from the Australian version. We kind of just packed as many jokes and outrageous moments as we could into the pilot and made a great pilot, I think. But now when it was really like, oh, okay, we have to really create a world and a language of this show and an identity for what this show is and isn't, that there was an enormous amount of figuring out like who is Forrest? Why is he doing it? What is he doing? What do we see? What is his methodology? Do we ever see behind the curtain? And if so, how? And so there was a lot to figure out. And it was a lot of brain puzzles in that process.
More problems that require comedy solutions.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't, I'm sure this is the case in a lot of comedy rooms. It really doesn't feel like you're making laughs, most of the time. You're spending a lot of time going, but that would never happen. Yeah, but this show doesn't do that. Yeah, but that's how this show is different from other shows because we don't do that. Like there's an enormous amount of saying no for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And were you the sort of leader of that writer's room then?
Yeah, Jeff Blitz and I co-ran the room together.
Okay. You shared
Always.
that.
Yeah, we're always in the room at the same time. Everybody's in the room at the same time. We kind of co-run it.
Cool. So you're, can you tell us where you're at with the show now?
So now we have written and shot all of season 2, and we're deep into editing it. We'll be done editing it in 6 weeks or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I've now seen at least rough cuts of all but the last episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you just exhausted from that? You're going to take a break, or are you just getting revved up?
I am. It's an interesting combination. Like, because I've been working on this full time since June. We convened the writing room in June of 2014, and there was no break in the writing room. We in fact did not really give ourselves enough time to write this number of episodes. Like we needed to have given ourselves maybe 5 more weeks than we had. So it was intense. It was a very intense schedule, and writing right up until we went into production, and then writing some during production, which is hard to do because they're 12-hour shoot days and I'm in every scene. And then the shoot itself was really intense. Every day a 12-hour day. And then we had a little break for Christmas, but that's not a break when you have kids.
It's just more work.
It's just more work right into editing. And so we're about to have a couple of weeks off in April, which I'm really hoping I have the wisdom to use to relax. But it's an odd thing because it's such an odd combination of exciting and just hard drudgery work. Like I just watched a new cut of our 8th episode today, and I realized as I hit play on it that I had this feeling that I have every time I hit play on one of these cuts, which is just like, here we go, back to work. Watching something that now I've seen a bunch of times, and I know that there are going to be little things that feel like they don't work, and I'm definitely going to be staring at myself. I'm about to stare at myself for 10 minutes, so it's because we watch these so many times, and it's such a process of getting something that's 33 minutes down to 21 and a half minutes. It's hard, but I can report that first instance of watching what you shot cut together by great editors is exhilarating and hilarious and fun, and it feels like I see the work ahead and I like the work ahead and I know the end result is going to be good. It's just there's a slog that follows that.
Yeah. And are you fueled through those slogs and all that hard work and all those long hours by just the sheer joy of doing the comedy, or do you have because a lot of comedy people are creative thinkers. They think creatively. They don't have a lot of practical, functional life skills necessarily, because a lot of times creativity is just so like la-di-da out there. It's a totally like different part of the brain to like manage a schedule and get things done on time and all that stuff. Do you find that challenging? Do you have a system for that? Do you have help? Do they give you like, is there a producer whose job it is to sort of keep you on your deadlines, or how does that all work for you?
I think I'm pretty good about it. Actually, I have to say, I have an appetite for putting things into my iCal and keeping a thorough to-do list and checking things off. Like there's definitely, and I experience that as stuff that I have to do in order to be creative. You know what I mean? Like if I know I have a creative task ahead of me, I like to sit down and do 15 minutes of essentially pencil sharpening. You know what I mean? Like I like to ease into it with nuts and bolts. So I'm pretty good at scheduling out my time and knowing what I have to do by when, and I actually kind of enjoy that.
That's great. You're lucky. So your family, your kids, do they understand and respect what you do, or do they hate that you're working 15, 16 hours a day?
The 43 days of 12-hour shoots did not go over great. That was hard. That was really hard. But this is a lot better. But I did have to. There was a process of pulling back from that mode into the editing mode, which is a little bit. It can be a little bit of an easier schedule. Like I can watch edits from home, and I can say, You're going to have to wait until the morning to get my feedback on this because I'm going to pick up my kid at school. Like I can do that stuff. Right. And there were a few weeks where I was not doing that as well as I should have. There was a downshift that needed to happen. And I had corrected on that.
If somebody out there, just out of high school or in college, or just doing some improv, doing some sketch, wants to be a performer, wants to have a career trajectory very similar to yours, based on the way things have changed since you got started, you're in the business, you see how it works, what would be your best advice for that person to proceed at this point?
I think the most valuable thing is to get yourself in proximity to people who are all starting out like you are, who are serious about having careers in this business like you are, and who are, more than that, actually serious about the craft and like talking about comedy and have a reason to be doing comedy. Something they want to accomplish creatively in comedy that you can all talk about and discuss and get on the same page about and pull together with. And I think a great place to do that is in the UCB training center system in New York or LA. I'm sure there are other great places to do it, other little communities all over the place to do that. I suppose now people are learning how to use digital cameras and digital editing and all that stuff. Not me.
Yeah, you seem to have taken a very non-digital route the whole way, right? When the internet was really dawning, you totally sidestepped it.
I did. That's true. I did. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like I feel like I watch a lot of self-made video pieces for the internet, and I just feel like, man, the quality difference between something that amateurs have made to show what they can do as actors and writers versus a professional piece of video there's such a massive gulf in there for me most of the time that I just feel like don't bother, because it's hard for me to watch and appreciate something that looks slapdash. And so I've never seen that as like a great medium for expressing what you can do as an actor and a writer. I'd rather just put it up on stage. Now that said, there are certain groups, like I know, for instance, I saw some bits that the Birthday Boys did before they had a professional sketch show, and they knew what they were doing. Like they put it across professionally. So for me, if you can do that, if you can figure out, I don't know what it is, whether it's all about having a great director or a great editor or great equipment. But if you can make that happen, that's obviously a great idea. But I'm not interested in like these things where obviously somebody does not know where to put the camera or how to mic people or or how to edit it, and it's just a bad demonstration of your acting and writing.
Well, it's a very professional attitude to make your mistakes on stage, build your craft, get to know people. And once you're at the level where you are worthy of being in a video, you'll be surrounded by so many people who doing that in that business who can do it professionally. You're just going to look better. You're just you're going to, and that's what you always did. You always appeared in, professional shows. Nobody associates you with, an amateur level of comedy. I don't know if they ever have.
Yeah.
Is there anything new you're working on you want to talk about?
Well, there is, my podcast, which I am every day. Somebody asks me every day whether there's going to be a second season of the Andy Daly Pilot Podcast Project, and I'm about an eighth of my brain is currently chewing on that. So I hope to be able to tell people to watch for that, but just know I'm chewing on it. Great.
And in that extra half hour between your 12-hour day and your family time and your sleep, I'm sure you can get it done. Because you're the calendar master.
Yes, exactly. I'll find those slices of time.
Thanks so much for spending the time with us today, Andy. Really appreciate it.
And, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.